Hey, sorry, I can't. I just can't with this internet. Oh my god, having a rough go here. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Um, just want to make sure. So when I start reading the book, waiting so long for page load, or I don't. I'm breaking up. Maybe I should just restart it real quick and come back. Okay. I'll be right back. Can you guys hear me? Hello? Wow. Hello? Wow. Hello? Hold on. I'm going to tell my kid to. Rewind, please. Thank you. Yeah, I believe it too, Teresa. Work as well. It is like 12 years old. So fine. Okay. But this one too. Come on. So I'm just dying to read this book. I wonder if I can. Let me see. Let me try something. So am I all right? You guys can hear me? I just don't want to start reading and nobody would be able to even hear me. Sorry, this is really pissing me off. Hey, Melanie. No, I'm already live on my computer. I can't go on my phone unless. So hopefully tomorrow, I've got a laptop picked out and I'm hoping to put a down payment on tomorrow and then get the goddamn thing because I've had it. I mean, had it. Like this laptop, it's going. Oh, it's fucking going. I've had it. There's a cool little inscriptions in this. I did want to share my screen, but I'm terrified. I'm gonna try it anyways, actually. And if not, I'll just stop sharing. That way you're not just looking at my face. Oh, not that one. Oh, it's frustrating as hell, Patty. I was gonna get it. I thought I was gonna get it for Wednesday, but I just don't have the money. There. Can you? Looks like we can see everything. Everybody can hear me. I hope so. She's gorgeous, very gorgeous. This Elizabeth short. There's a mugshot of her too. I'm not sure. We'll have to. So there's a little inscription here, and it says, "It was that name, Black Dahlia, that set this one off." Just those words strung together in that order. Black is night, mysterious, forbidding. The dahlia, an exotic, mysterious flower. Any other name, and it wouldn't have been the same. And this was um, Sergeant Harry Hansen. Okay, so this is just Black Dahlia ever solved. I'm going to wrap in a mystery inside an enigma. The puzzling homicide has continued to mystify the world. Dahlia case remains stamped and now I sound robotic. Come fucking on, man. Is horrible because we have this storm. I can't catch a break. I just can't. Am I right? You guys can hear me now, I hope. I sound like a goddamn commercial. Can you hear me now? What about now? Can you hear me now? How about now? Like, it's making me angry. Waiting on what? Why won't this? Oh my god. Waiting on the bandwidth? Is that what it says? I sound good now? I hope so. Because I'm going to chuck it. I'm telling you. What do you think, Ash? I think we should stomp it. punch it, kick it. All right, let's try this one again. So time is often the enemy. Justice, memories fade, witnesses die, and today the Black Dahlia murder is a cold, cold case. In our kinetic age, the headlines of the day are soon forgotten, and major stories, scandals, and unsolved mysteries are buried in such a time machine rolls on. The public becomes immersed in the next scandal, the next war, the next cataclysm, the next murder. But time can also be the friend of the truth. The 20th century is literally a storehouse of documentation once hidden from public view, and many of these yellow documents hold the answers to yesterday's memories. Do you know? So I was looking, I just wanted a photo of Elizabeth Short, and her, her crime scene photos are on there, right out in the open material. Of the Kevlar Crime Commission are being indexed and slowly, although time when he sealed the Warren Commission investigator. Less than 40 years ago, many of the documents continued to become available. Who wrote this book? Donald H. Wolfe. Oh, is it screwing up again? Cannot be. Like, she's on the front cover. There's the dahlia flower, and then there's Elizabeth Short, and at the bottom it's her body, but they touched up her face so you can't see the cuts, and they put a blanket on her so you don't see her in half. In 2002, Los Angeles District Attorney Steve Cooley began establishing an archive of historic 20th century crime investigations, culled from the immense LAPD warehouse and the files of the District Attorney's office. Included in the archive of notable cases were the Black Dahlia files, containing a wealth of testimony, documented evidence, and information that had never before been made public. For the first time, the district attorney's files reveal the bizarre modus operandi of the crime, establish a timeline of where the victim lived in the last years of her life, identify the people she knew, and provide a list of all the suspects, many of whom were never previously mentioned by the police or the press. The press. Most importantly, the files document the hidden motivation of the psychopathic killer, the dark secret hidden from the public for more than half a century. The files also revealed the Herculean effort by the upper echelons of the Los Angeles Police Department to cover up the nature of this crime. None of the extensive material had been available to former investigator journalists and researchers who spent years attempting to solve the baffling Black Dahlia murder with the limited information that was then accessible. If the district attorney's archives had been available to John Gilmore when he wrote Severed, the true story of the Black Dahlia murder, he would have known just how close he was to solving the crime. Wait, really? Mary, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I don't know, Mary Pachos, who had known the Black Dahlia as a child and painted such an insightful portrait of her in Childhood Shadows, the hidden story of the Black Dahlia murder, may have elected to eliminate some of the people on her suspect list. James Ellroy could have written a nonfiction book about the case rather than a novel, and Janice Knowlton, author of Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer, okay, I didn't know that either, would have been spared the anguish of believing her father was the murderer. Wow, that's news to me. Hey, Leslie. Thank you, Country Girl Brenda. That is amazing. Thank you. Oh, and also thank you for the book. I was thinking on Mondays, I would read that. I would read it because I want to read it now. It's like just making me itch. And there's also another true crime story at the end of it too. I actually have the book for it, and I've already read it, but this I'm interested in it. The Staircase. Yeah, the murder of. I have to read this too. So I like knowledge. I like crime. Steve Huddle, author of the most recent book on the case, Black Dahlia Avenger, also accused his father, George Huddle, of being the killer. Wow. Had he not completed his book just prior to the district attorney's archives, he would have learned that his father neither knew the Black Dahlia nor had anything to do with the crime. Born and raised in Los Angeles, I was 15 years old when the Black Dahlia murder took place. And all the screaming headlights landed on our doorstep. Early on, I began collecting pieces of the Black Dahlia puzzle, and through the years, I encountered reporters and police officers who had worked the case, including Will Fowler, the first reporter on the scene, Aggie Underwood, the Ace Hurst crime reporter, homicide detective Finis Brown, and badge number 1, John St. John. Hey, Dragon Mama. Hey, Mama 3. You're making Brad's dinner. I met former LAPD officer Vince Carter in 1992 while researching the last days of Marilyn Monroe. That's actually administrative vice at the time of the murder had a insight into the crime, as well as the depths of corruption within the upper echelons of the LAPD. And it was Vince who led me to the 2 LAPD intelligence officers who had discovered where the Black Dahlia murder took place and knew the identity of the killer. What? They knew? Wow. I was first alerted to the district attorney's historical archives by Steve Lopez, a columnist for the Los Angeles Times. Lopez had heard rumors about the DA's Black Dahlia files and was the first to view them. After receiving permission from the district attorney's office to study and copy the documents, I soon realized they were a treasure trove of new and significant evidence. Some of the most valuable information was contained in the handwritten notes and the memos of Lieutenant Frank Jemison, who had been the investigator when the Black Dahlia case was placed before the grand jury in 1949. Hello, patty cake. It was while studying Jameson's notes that more than half a century after they were written that I knew I had found the pieces that were missing from the Black Dahlia puzzle. With all the pieces in place, I soon realized that they created a monstrous murder mosaic that was far more sinister than ever surmised. And clearly identifiable within the shadows of this assembled picture with the image of the killer himself, who had wandered the labyrinth, corridors of power and greed that crisscrossed the dark underworld of Los Angeles in 1947. And that was written by the author. This book I'm reading is called The Black Dahlia Files. And then under it, it says The Mob, the Mogul, and the Murder that transfixed Los Angeles. It's a quite a big book. I don't know. I'm just excited to read it. There's a lot of things in here I've already kind of peeked through, and it just blows my mind. All right, so we're starting on. Oh, that's a police report. Oh, it's a police interview. That's cool. Okay, so this is part 1, a riddle wrapped in a mystery. And this one's titled, so this is the very first chapter, and this one's titled The Monster. There wasn't much nightlife in Los Angeles back in the 1940s. Most people went to bed early. Even in Hollywood, the streets were empty, and the town were pretty dead by 10 p.m. But as the city slept, the monster would come to life. The hulking behemoth invariably awoke around jolt into action. The gears would begin to rotate, the wheels turn, and the planes clank into position. As the steely colossus pulsed into motion, the cavernous depths would begin to vibrate and the roar became deafening, the rollers turning faster and faster as the leading plates whirled in a rhythmic crescendo of sound and motion. I have no idea what he's talking about. Okay, now I get it. The gigantic press was as tall as a 2-story building. Rows of flames dried the ink as huge rolls of paper were consumed by the revolting plates that fed the printers through the cutter. Smoke from the flames would stench of ink and oil, filling the press room with its acrid odor, not order. Before they could roll the press, dozens of people would gather and edit the daily news about war and rumors of war, weddings, births, funerals, sports, movie stars, society, kidnappings, robberies, politics, and murder. And every 24 hours at about midnight, they'd press the red button once again, and the monster would come to life, devour it all, and spit out the news through the flames that dried the ink and singed the truth, the lies, and Felix the cat. Oh, I remember that comic. Then the monster would fold it, bundle it up, and throw it down the chute, where the trucks waited in the night to distribute the Los Angeles Examiner. So the monster is the Los Angeles Examiner, or the place that makes it? Hmm. When the Black Dahlia murder hit the headlines on January 15th, 1947, it led to one of the biggest press runs in the history of the newspaper. More of the Los Angeles than any edition during World War II. It was the beginning of a rapid running war between the LA newspapers to scoop their rivals in the Dahlia case, a bitter battle fought with words, ink, payoffs, and new pulp from day to day for weeks and weeks, right to the daily headline. Back in those days, you could read all about it for a nickel, though there were those in the City of the Angels who knew what was printed in the LA newspapers about the Black Dahlia case wasn't worth cents. All right, this part is called Extra Extra, like newspapers. I don't know, I've seen it in movies where the little boys run around with their hats and they're like, extra, extra, read all about it. I was raised on the wrong side of the tracks in Beverly Hills. All right. The Pacific Electric Railway bisected the city, and people like Gary Cooper, Betty Grable, Louis B. Mayer, Mary Pickford, and Marlene Dietrich lived north of the tracks. The Cecil Hotel, yeah. I'd love to dive into that too, actually. Oh, not the Cecil? Okay. We lived on the south side on Keaton Drive, where some of our neighbors were strictly name below the title B movie folks. Joe E. Brown, Billy Gilbert lived down the street, Anne Revere across the way, and J. Carroll Naish around the corner. The south side had its compensations, however. I used to roller skate with Elizabeth Taylor before she became a child. I read her book too, Elizabeth Taylor's book. It was pretty good. I read a lot. She and her brother Howard lived nearby in Charlieville, I think that is, and she was a member of what some of the neighborhood kids called the Beverly Hills Skating Club. With the onset of adolescence, we changed the name to the Beverly Hills Kissing Club. But before Elizabeth Taylor could be initiated, she was taken away from us by MGM. Although I was from the lower depths of the South Side, I attended El Rodeo Grammar School, which was to the north in the land of the majors. Some of my friends and schoolmates were children of the rich and famous. I first saw Gone with the Wind in David O. Selznick's living room on the occasion of Jeffrey Selznick's 12th birthday. Jeffrey and I were friends at school and scouts in Troop 3. I don't know that hotel. Biltmore Hotel? Our Boy Scout house was donated by Will Rogers and stood near the wilds of the LA Country Club. While learning to light campfires by rubbing sticks together on the manicured greens of the 14th tree, the Selznick's chauffeured limousine would be waiting outside the rustic scout house to drive Jeffrey home to his Summit Drive mansion. Oh, the author is Donald H. Wolfe. I can write it here. Hold on. This book, because I was researching it, which one I should pick because there's a lot of them. This one here won me over because it's got everything, and everybody was raving about it. All the critics, this is the best book of it all. So I just got this one. There, that's his name. Whenever my older brother Robert and I drove with my mother and father through the north side streets of Beverly Hills, with all the imposing mansions, my father would inevitably say, "Behind those mansion doors, there's often a great deal of unhappiness." And my mother would inevitably respond, "Behind the door of dumps, there's also a lot of unhappiness, but a lot less room." After my parents divorced in 1943, my mother married Jeffrey Bernard, a movie producer, and we moved north across the tracks to the land of the majors, where we lived behind one of those mansion doors where there's often a great deal of unhappiness. But I had it good compared to many of my friends who suffered grievously from material riches and emotional want, and I soon learned that my dad was right. In some of those big homes, I observed a lot of unhappiness, broken hearts, drunks, neurotics, psychotics, suicides, and an occasional murder. Hey, Benita. Many of my pals at El Rodeo and Beverly Hills High School were driven directly from school to their analyst office on Bedford Journal money, power, and influence, and that the truth and what was printed in the newspapers was not necessarily the same. Beneath appearances and the public image, there was the whispered story, and beneath the whispered story, there was the cover story, and somewhere beneath the cover story lay the genuine rumor, while the body of truth often laid entombed within the corridors of intrigue. I was a sophomore at Beverly Hills High School when the Black Dahlia murder occurred, and all the cover story and gen rumors began, but I had reason to suspect that the truth lay sealed in the catacombs of money, power, and influence, in a carefully guarded crypt that has not been violated until this day. A jovial, smiling figure of Charlie McCarthy wearing his monocle, boot, and funny top hat sat on the rim above the speaker of my bedside radio. In the 1940s, you could listen to Red Skelton, Jack Benny, Gangbusters, Fibber McGee and Molly, Edgar Burgeon, and Charlie McCarthy, and a host of highly entertaining radio shows. But by 10 p.m., the entertainment came to an end, and you knew it was time to go to sleep when the fruit frost warnings came on. If the temperature dropped below 35 Fahrenheit in the San Fernando and San Gabriel valleys, the ranchers had to go out, light their smudge pots to ward off the frost that could damage the citrus crops. On the night of Tuesday, January 14th, 1947, the fruit frost warning had been posted and broadcasted on the 10 o'clock news. At that hour, few people were out on the streets. They were only those who worked late, those who were coming home from the movies or the wrestling matches at Legion Stadium, and the introvert people, night people, the sleepless, the homeless, the inebriated. Downtown at the Hearst Examiner building on 11th Street and Broadway, preparing the presses for the midnight run of the Examiner, casting the lead plate maxers, mounting the giant paper rolls, fixing the ink vats, and oiling the rollers. Knickerbockers. That's a hotel. That sounds funny. In the small hours after midnight, Bobby Jones, a young man in his early teens, wheeled his bicycle through a vacant lot near 39th Street and Norton Avenue in Leimert Park. He had gotten up long before dawn to fold and prepare the newspapers for delivery on his route along Crenshaw Boulevard. In those days, Leimert Park was a nice middle-class neighborhood on the fringe of more fashionable Adams District west of downtown Los Angeles, where the region of vacant lots with driveways leading to nothing but weeds and wild bushes. Although it was quite dark when Bobby pushed his bicycle through the weeds, he noticed a black sedan with its lights off as it parked next to the sidewalk. The street lighting was dim. The street lighting was dim. He could not see the occupants of the car. Assuming they might be neckers, Bobby that means like they're gonna make out, right? Neckers. That's cute. Bobby thought little of what he had observed. 53 in 1947, but the sun was shrouded in mist, and the dampness and dew remained on the grass and weeds until that late morning when the sun finally burned through. At about 10:30 a.m., at Lemur Park resident Betsy Bersinger was pushing her 3-year-old daughter in a baby stroller down the sidewalk, boarding the vacant lots on Norton Avenue, when she noticed what she thought to be an undressed department store mannequin lying in the weeds near the sidewalk. The discarded mannequin appeared to be broken. The legs were disconnected from the waist, and the top of the torso lay in the grass not far from the legs and a section of the hips. The breasts seemed to have become detached, and the arms were raised above the head, which faced the street. Her breasts were removed. Oh my. Mrs. Bursinger noticed that the head had been badly damaged and that there were red marks on her face. She suddenly stopped pushing the baby stroller and stared at the broken head in frozen disbelief as she realized that the red marks were congealed blood, that the broken store dummy was actually the mutilated nude remains of. Yeah, I didn't remember that either. I didn't know her breasts were. Um, wow. Yeah, the breasts seem to have become detached. I didn't know that either. Well, this book, like I said, it's got all of the facts because the police files are now open. She was at the Cecil Motel as well. That place is very haunted. So she was at the Cecil. Really? Um, Dragon said another one. What was it? Because that's what Jill was saying too. That she was at the Cecil, Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles. That Cecil Hotel. There's got to be books on that. So many people stayed there. Yeah. Hurrying to a neighbor's house, she called the police and tried to give a coherent report of what she had seen before lapsing into shock. At about 10:45 a.m., the Los Angeles Examiner reporter Will Fowler and photographer Felix Pagel were returning to the downtown Examiner building from a story they had covered earlier that morning at the Beverly Hills Hotel when they heard the call go out over the police band on their shortwave radio. Yeah, that I was just going to say. Richard Ramirez stayed there, and an Austrian killer stayed there too. Elisa Lamb, yep, she died there too. She's Canadian as well, yeah. I still don't understand that one. It was really gross because they were actually drinking the water that Elisa Lamb was in from the tanks. They all complained about the water from the tap. Yeah, and that was why. I remember reading that part. It was wow. Her case is really screwed up as well. At 390 West 415, down in an empty lot on Norton, 1 block east of Crenshaw between 39th and Coliseum Streets, proceed to investigate Code 2. Yeah, definitely haunted and definitely bad vibes. Agreed. Yeah. Code 2 meant that the police cars in the vicinity should proceed as quickly as possible, but without a red light or a siren. A 390 meant a drunk. A 390W was a drunk woman, and a 415 designated indecent exposure. Really? That's what they said? Wow. Fowler and Pagel were only blocks from the location when they heard the code 2, and Fowler recalled that they decided to drive by and see what it was all about. Pagel, who was driving, turned east onto 39th Street, and when they arrived at Norton, they found that they were the first to arrive at the scene. As Pagel drove along the row of vacant lots looking for the disrobed drunken woman, they glimpsed someone lying in the weeds near the sidewalk. Fowler looked more closely and exclaimed, "God, Felix, this woman's been cut in half." Recalling that horrifying moment, Fowler said it took a few minutes to get used to looking at this mutilated woman lying there like a discarded marionette that they had separated from itself. The torso was about a foot away from the legs and the pelvis. Both halves were facing upward. Her arms, huge trigger warning, guys. Her arms were extended above her head. Her eyes were still half open. There was no blood on the grass, and her body was white as marble. Fowler had observed a number of gruesome murder scenes in his career, but nothing like this. The victim's mouth had been slit open from ear to ear, and her face and head had been badly beaten. He noted that the blows to the head were characteristic of someone who had been pistol whipped. I didn't know she was pistol whipped too. Holy fuck, this poor girl. No, yeah, I don't know. If I saw something like that, I don't think I'd be okay ever. Yes, I read that at the very beginning, and I didn't know that either. But now, I guess, but he wrote a book. Yeah, he was claiming that his father killed the Black Dahlia, and he ended up writing a book and pointing out his father, and it turned out it actually wasn't his father at all. So his book was a complete waste. The face, yeah, the face with the sliced smile in it. I didn't know that she was beaten with a pistol. They call it pistol whipping. I didn't know that part either. And so, I mean, we're going to find out a lot of things in this book that none of us knew. I mean, we all know the story, you know what I mean? But not everything. And that's why I wanted to read this book. I've always wanted to do. Remember, yeah, it was her, the and American Pie. Yeah. Of course, I can't remember her name, but you're absolutely right. The Cecil has been renovated and turned into a housing. Are you serious? Oh, that's not good. While Fowler was studying the gruesome remains of the victim and taking notes, Pagel took out his 4x5 speed graphic. I don't know what the hell speed graphic is. And began taking pictures. Okay, this must be some sort of camera. Within minutes, on LA police car pulled up to the curb and two units started seeing Fowler and Pagel hovering around the mutilated body. Officers Fitzgerald and Perkins released the safety straps on their holsters as they approached, and Fitzgerald pulled out his revolver. I would shit. Seriously? Can you imagine? And you see this poor woman just mutilated, and then these two cops come up with a gun. I'd be like, oh my god, great. They think I did it. They think I did. Oh, I'd be terrified. I'm a report. Of course, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking KJ. I'm a reporter. These guys actually are reporters, though. I'm a reporter on the Examiner, and this is my photographer, Fowler explained as he showed them his press ID. You hear that? You need press ID. Hell, someone's cut this girl right in half, Sergeant Perkins exclaimed as Officer Fitzgerald stared at the body with disbelief. Get on the radio, Perkins said, and put this right through to the watch commander. Get them over here fast. Thank you, Trio. I'm gonna actually I want to do a live with Cecil. I've been wanting to do that for a long time as well. There's a lot. Returning to the patrol car, Fitzgerald grabbed the microphone and requested to speak to Lieutenant Paul Freestone, the watch commander on duty at University Station on Jefferson Boulevard. In the days before scanners, CB radios, and cell phones, reporters always carried extra nickels in their pockets to phone in the news. And while the police were preoccupied in examining the body and reporting to the station, Fowler hurried to the nearest payphone on Crenshaw, dropped in a nickel, and dialed his editor, James Richardson, at the Examiner City desk. Richardson was incredulous at the description of the murder victim, but when Fowler insisted that the body was cut in half, Richardson told him to hurry into the editorial office with the photos and start preparing a front page story. I don't know. Yeah, it was on the front page. Hello, Bear's Nightmare. You're running from the chat. You asked her to show her receipt. She didn't have any, did she? She blocked you? Pay that girl no mind. Trust me. Hey, Two Skulls. Yeah, right, Tammy. I agree because I've watched all American Horror Stories, but yeah, she's been in it. Oh, what is her name? It's gonna drive me nuts now. I'm gonna make me a press ID. Country girl Brenda. It will say, "Don't press my button. Go find a sandwich." That's good. Yeah, exactly, Dragon. That smile is called the Glasgow smile. That's what it's called. Wow, Glasgow smile. Thank you for that information. I did not know that. The city room was already buzzing about the grotesque murder when Fowler and Pagel arrived. Fowler began typing out his initial copy while Pagel's photo negatives were quickly processed. When the first large 11 by 14 print of the victim's severed body came out of the lab, called the city room people together and held up the photo. That is horrible. So it was on the front page of the newspaper. Wow. I totally agree with you. Autistic, yeah. Take a good look, Richardson said. This is what a lot of you will be working on today. And he informed them they were going to beat the afternoon papers out on the street with the story and put out an extra. By the time Fowler returned to Leimert Park, the scene on Norton was crowded with reporters, photographers, and uniformed officers who were having difficulty keeping back the growing crowd of curious spectators. Reporters from the Los Angeles Times, the Hollywood Citizen News, and the Daily were there, and Fowler spotted Hearst reporter Agnes Aggie Underwood, one of the few women who had scaled the gender barrier and climbed to the heights as one of Hearst's key reporters. Aggie Underwood worked for the Hearst evening paper, the Los Angeles Herald Express, and she had a reputation of being hard as nails. But when Aggie first viewed the victim's remains, Sergeant Perkins recalled, you could see the color drain right out of her like you'd open a spigot on her bottom side. I have no clue what that means. Like you open a spigot on her bottom side. Although Aggie had seen many murder victims in her career, the sight of the mutilated body lying in the weeds near the sidewalk knocked her off her balance, and Perkins remembered that she staggered backwards, almost right off the edge of the curb, and almost fell down on her keister. Aggie had recovered her composure by the time Fowler returned to the scene, but she didn't realize that he had been there earlier. And Aggie diversely remarked, how come you let the Times beat you here, Fowler? My keister. I'm going to say that to my son. I'm going to say, hey, watch your keister, boy. Oh my God. I'm glad I can laugh a little bit because this book is probably going to be really hard. It wasn't until the Examiner extra with Fowler's story and Pagel's photos beat the Herald Express onto the street that Aggie realized Fowler had been there much earlier. When Officer Fitzgerald informed Watch Commander Paul Freestone at University that the 309W was a severed corpse, Freestone sent homicide detective Jesse Haskins to the scene. Observing the condition of the body, Lieutenant Haskins noted that the body was cold and alabaster white. The remains had been drained of blood and seemed to have been soaked in water. There was little or no blood to be seen on the grass beneath the two sections of the corpse, and it was obvious that the murder had taken place someplace else. Haskins soon realized what he was viewing was unlike any homicide he had ever encountered. This was a crime of another dimension outside the realm of his experience. He was somewhat relieved when he received a call from Captain Jack Donahue, Chief of Homicide in the Central Division, informing him that homicide detectives Harry Hansen and Finis Brown from Central would be taking over the case from the university. Detective Sergeant Harry Hansen had been with the LAPD since 1926 and was the senior officer serving investigations in Central's Metropolitan District. Hansen was investigating a crime in downtown Los Angeles with his partner, Finis Brown, when he received a call that morning from Captain Donahue telling him to proceed to 39th Street and Norton as quickly as possible. A spigot, it's the thing you screw the water hose into. It has a name. Well, obviously, I guess it would have a name. I didn't know that. No, not Reese. Oh, what is her name? It's going to drive me insane. I'll figure it out probably when I'm done this. It was almost noon before Hansen and Brown reached the Norton crime scene, and from the beginning, Hansen was unhappy with the way University had handled it. Hansen was the author of the police handbook on the protection of crime scene evidence, and what he saw when he arrived all the rules. Reporters had been allowed to roam the area, possibly obliterating tire tracks and footprints, and they had littered the crime scene with cigarette butts and burnt flashbulbs. The street had not been blocked off and was rapidly filling with cars of the curious, and some of the spectators had converged onto the vacant lot. Hansen had a somewhat mystical approach to a homicide. In his police handbook, he had decreed a murder scene as a sacred setting. Homicide is a union that never dies, Hansen stated. He maintained that the murder forever bonds together the murderer and the victim. Like marriage, murder is an irreversible act. It can never be changed or the circumstances altered. You can get a divorce. So, yeah, you can. Not the unaliving part, though. The murderer and the victim are tied together in a bond that goes into infinity. That's why I say it's sacred, and every murder scene has its sacred ground which should be touched. That's it. Mina Savari, thank you. I'm just going to turn my camera on. Here's the actual crime scene. Sorry, I'm trying to show. Can you guys see it? So that's the actual crime scene there. I am not showing tonight. I've been cleaning all day. I'm going to have a shower later. So this is a Norton Avenue crime scene. The victim's remains are the center left. Oh, shit. Okay, you can see it. Wow. Yeah, she was cut in two. I was just going to say I love the cars too. Hansen believed that the evidence includes regarding the victim as well as found in what may appear to be, or to the casual observer, as insignificant detail. I have to read that again. Hansen believed that evidence and clues regarding the victim as well as the murderer could be found in what may appear to the casual observer as insignificant detail. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Every minute shred of evidence he felt was a tessera in a large mosaic picture, even if the body was disposed of in a different location than the scene of the actual murder. Dismayed that Norton Avenue crime scene had been disturbed, Hansen told the uniformed officers to clear the area and call in Ray Pinker, who was head of LAPD's crime lab. Get him over here, Hansen commanded as he kneeled down at the edge of the room. Hansen was known for his scientific objectivity in investigating a murder case, but in his 20 years of police work, he had never seen a victim so brutally mutilated as the victim on Norton. According to Finis Brown, Hansen's stolid wall seemed to crumble a little when he first viewed the bisected body. Hansen noted that there were rope marks on the victim's neck, wrists, and ankles. I didn't know that either, that I can remember. Yeah, bisected. So Hansen noted that there were rope marks on the victim's neck, wrists, and ankles, and there were a number of severe bruises to the face and the right side of the forehead, as though she had been repeatedly struck by a blunt instrument. Both cheeks slashed open from the corners of the mouth to the earlobes. Holy shit, it was that big. Oh, there goes my cupboards. Ghost wants to play. Her breasts had been partially mutilated, and her arms were bruised and bent at right angles and extended back over the shoulders. You didn't know about the rope, say? Me neither. I only have one hand, and my index finger gets excited and goes nuts and deadly. So her breasts were partially mutilated. Okay. Wow. Hansen noted that the body had been meticulously bisected at the waist, nearly neatly and surgically. Some of the inner organs had been removed. The legs were spread apart, and there were strange knife marks in the pubic area and on the upper legs. Unlike most rage murders, the victim's body had been displayed, not dumped. Hansen and Brown arranged the bisected body near a public sidewalk where the killer apparently wanted it to be discovered. Noting that there was dampness from the dew on the grass beneath the body, Hansen concluded that the remains had probably been placed in the lot sometime between midnight and dawn. On the grass not far from the upper torso was an empty cement sack that appeared to have watery blood stains. A watery blood spot was also visible on the sidewalk near the body, along with a man's bloody heel print near the victim's head. Jesus. Hansen silently studied the body and the sacred setting for some time before he stood up and said to Finnis, "We won't know what we're really dealing with here until we get a postmortem." He requested that the body be covered until Ray Pinker of the crime lab arrived. When Pinker appeared at the scene shortly afternoon, he examined the body and made the preliminary determination that the victim had been dead for at least 10 hours, possibly longer. Pinker found that there was postmortem lividity on the front side of both parts of the body, indicating the victim had lain face down for some period of time following death. The multiplicity of bruises, wounds, and lacerations made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, which would have to be determined at the autopsy. Discovering some small bits of bristle-like fragments on the victim's face and pubic region, Pinker believed that they may have been from a scrub brush. A scrub brush? He noted that there was a 4-inch incision in the lower abdomen and that flesh had been removed from the left leg above the knee. Pinker concurred with Hansen that the lower section of the body had been transported from the vehicle on the empty cement sack found near the body. The contours of the cement sack indicated that it might have been carried by more than one. Your granddad called her good time gal? A streetwalker. She wasn't she though? I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure she was a prostitute. It was to get off the fingerprints, yeah. There was another serial killer that mangled the breaststroke, but I can't remember who. I know Bundy bit and mutilated. Yeah, Bundy was one of them. There's another one? Wow. I don't know who the other one was. I know Ted Bundy was, though. You're right about that one. Detectives knocking on doors in the surrounding area found a witness who corroborated the newsboy's story of seeing a black sedan at the Norton Avenue site. Robert Meyer, who lived at 3900 South Bronson, said he saw a black 1936 or 1937 Ford sedan drive up and park at the site in the hours before dawn. It stayed about 3 or 4 minutes and then it drove off, Meyer told the police. He explained that he had not seen anything to arouse his suspicions at the time because the weeds obscured his view. Your husband bought you another box of candy? Saul loves me. Oh yeah, the toy box killer. That one. Thank you, Country Girl Brenda, for the book. I don't know if you heard me, but I got it and I can't wait to read it. The Staircase. Meyer believed it was approximately 6:30 saw the old black Ford sedan, but the newsboy Bobby Jones stated that he had seen the black sedan at around 4 a.m. One of the witnesses was incorrect regarding the time, or it's possible that the vehicle had been at the site twice in the early morning hours. Investigators found a man's wristwatch in the weeds near the body. It was determined that the watch had only recently been lost, as it did not appear to be weathered at all. Identified as a military watch, the Hollywood Citizen News described it as a 17-jewel croton with a leather-bound steel snap band. Engraved on it were the words "Swiss-made, waterproof, brevet, stainless steel, black." The person or one of the persons who disposed of the body may have discovered that His watch was missing and suspected it had been lost at the site. Perhaps concerned could be found on the base or the back of the steel casing, the owner might have returned in the black sedan in an attempt to retrieve it. Though it was stated by the press that police chemists were checking ownership of the military watch, no follow-up stories appeared regarding results of the examination for prints. No follow-up? Wow. When Pinker concluded his examination of the crime scene, he turned to Hansen and said, "This is the worst crime I've ever seen committed upon a woman." Hansen did not respond, but stood in silence as he stared at the sacred setting. I've never heard of that one. The San Diego torso killer? Jesus. Yeah, I want chocolate. I think I will want chocolate. No one at the scene on Norton Avenue that day, Betsy Bursing, the reporters, the detectives, the crime lab people, the uniformed officers, or the spectators would ever forget what they had seen, nor would they ever be quite the same. All of them sensed it was the worst murder in the history of Los Angeles, perhaps the worst crime of the century. It was survived to take the remains of the bodies to the Los Angeles County Morgue, located in the basement of the Hall of Justice in downtown Los Angeles. There the remains were unloaded, wheeled up near the ramp, and tagged Jane Doe 1. The Examiner Extra hit the streets at 3 p.m., beating the rival newspapers to the newsstands with the murder story by 1 hour. The Extra was sold out by 5:30 p.m., and a second run of the Extra was sold out by 10:30 p.m. One of the Pego photos of Jane Doe was printed on the front page, but staff artists retouched the victim's face and removed the gruesome knife slashes on either side of her mouth. Oh, good. Yeah, it says a blanket has been painted over the dissected body and have been retouched by Examiner artists. A blanket covering, the bisected body was airbrushed in, concealing the brutal mutilation. It would be decades before unretouched pictures of the victim were published, and the full horror of the killer's butchery became apparent. The weather had turned warmer during the day, and there was no fruit frost warning that night on the 10 o'clock news. Back in those days, few people had television. Here's the photo. They touched it up, though, so it doesn't... She's got a blanket on, and her face is somewhat fixed. So you don't... It's... Yeah, this was retouched for the newspaper, which I'm glad. I didn't want them to show... I thought for sure they were going to show the body. Like, that's crazy. They did, but it was covered up nicely. Oh, nothing could be done nicely, but yeah. Back in those days, few people had television. The one Los Angeles television station, KTLA, was only on the air for 3 hours in the evening, and the news still belonged to paper and ink and the radio waves. Because of a Boy Scout meeting that Wednesday, I had not seen the newspapers and first heard about the bizarre murder of Jane Doe number 1, and one of the gruesome details on my bedside radio were a jovial, smiling figure of Charlie McCarthy sat on the rim of the speaker wearing his monocle, boutonniere, and funny top hat. Here's the article, the actual one. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but and it's very hard to read. I need like a magnifying glass. Slayer's Prey. I can read that. Fiend tortures, kills girl, leaves body in LA. Jesus. Okay, this one is called Number Two. Number Two. We're on Number Two, and this chapter is called Jane Doe. The Los Angeles Examiner's headline story had a statical quality that reflected the brutal reality of the murder. Slain by, oh, okay, good. I can read it on the side of the newspaper because like it was so small. So it says, slain by a fiend, the body of a teen like yesterday. The nude body was severed at the waist. The girl had been killed elsewhere and her body taken to the lot and left in plain view, not 3 feet from the sidewalk. Death came to the girl, police scientists said, after hours of torture. Jeepers. The Evening Herald Express referred to the murder as a diabolical act of a werewolf fiend. In its 10-star final edition, the Daily News ran a 4-column photo of the crime scene with an arrow pointing to the body under the headline, Young LA Girl Slain, Body Slashed in Two. The Los Angeles Times put the murder story on the front page in the morning edition of January 16th. The headline was less lurid, yet the article vividly described the mutilated victim. It was the Hearst papers that gave the Black Dahlia story the biggest play. The Los Angeles Examiner and the Herald Express outdid themselves in sensational and in the exploitive way it was reported in the press. The hideous murder took on a surreal quality that seemed to hang over the city like the hovering smog. You're doing online grocery shopping. Yeah. I know. Nobody can live anymore with these prices. You just can't. There's no way. I'll be right back. I'm just going to go grab a drink. All right, I'm back. Yeah, there's no school tomorrow. There's no way. It's like raining, but yet it's snowing. Too large cock. I was, what? Are you? I swear I think my phone is possessed. One day, my big boss was at her salon, and I got sent to pick up everyone's lunch. I meant to ask her if she wanted a large Coke, and my phone changed the text to large cock. Oh, that's a little funny. But yeah, I understand. I'd be like, oh crap. It got changed to large cock, Patty. She was supposed to large coke, but instead it said large cock. Me, I would just go in the office or wherever it is, give her whatever the heck they ordered, and I would just laugh my ass off. I wouldn't be able to help it. Yeah, I had to go to the loo too. To a kid of 15, the Dahlia case was unspeakably bizarre. Though I didn't talk about it, I probably knew more about the Black Dahlia case than most of my classmates at Beverly Hills High. It was because of my uncle Vern. Vern wasn't really my uncle. but that was how my mother referred to him. Byrne was consorting with my grandmother, whom I called Little Ta. My My grandmother's real name was Bessie in the old chauffeur's quarters attached to her garage. Little Ta drank too much, and I tried to avoid her whenever possible. But when I went to bed at night, she would often come up to my room and tell me whiskey sodden bedtime tales. I'd fake falling asleep, but she'd go on regardless. Uncle Vern was always hanging around the house with little Ta, and I guess my mother thought that calling him uncle would make a questionable arrangement more palatable to an impressionable teenager and the nosy neighbors. Vern's real name was Vernon Hamilton, and he had been an assistant district attorney in Los Angeles before resigning in 1938 under a cloud of scandal, along with Mayor Frank Shaw and District Attorney Vern Fitz. Frank Shaw had been elected mayor of Los Angeles in 1933 and ran what was considered to be the most corrupt administration in the city's history, which was set in 1938. A grand jury investigating Shaw's corrupt regimen found evidence of 1,800 bookie joints, 600 brothels, and 200 gambling dens operating within the county of Los Angeles, all protected with payoffs from the underworld to District Attorney Vern Fitz, the LAPD, and His Honor, Mayor Frank Shaw. The evidence of the corruption was overwhelming and led to the recall of Shaw, the first mayor of a major city in the nation to be so honored, and it resulted in the resignation of Police Chief James E. Two Gun Davis and Uncle Vern's pal, Vern Fitz. Fitz had been the Los Angeles District Attorney since 1928, and the key component in the triad of corruption that ruled the city during the 1930s, Mayor Shaw, Police Chief Davis, Fitz had all been protégés of the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, Harry Chandler, built the city in a Times linotype machine. They were almost bare. No, I'm not KJ. You can derail the chat all you want. Yeah, we're in the same position, Teresa, and artists need a break from having to spend almost $10 on a carton of eggs. Like, really? $75 for cat litter? No. What is Chewy? Thank goodness for Chewy. What the hell is Chewy? Is that like an Amazon? Before the days of tabloid scandal sheets, Burton Fitz had covered up enough crimes and scandals to decimate forests of tabloid pulp. One of the notorious scandals had involved the alleged suicide of Jean Harlow's husband, Paul Byrne, who many believed had been murdered by mobster Longy Zwillman. Another cover-up had been the murder of actress Thelma Todd, best remembered for her comedic roles in Marx Brothers movies and Charlie Chase comedies. Thelma Todd, the ice cream blonde, had been a popular actress in the late 20s and early 30s. On December 6, 1935, her mink-clad corpse had been found sitting behind the wheel of the actress's Lincoln Phaeton in the garage behind Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, a popular night spot on the ocean front of Castellamare near the Pacific Palisades. The Phaeton's motor had been left running in the close, and it was ruled that the actress died of asphyxiation. The autopsy, however, disclosed that Thelma Todd had been badly beaten, her nose smashed, her body bruised and bloody, 2 broken ribs, and her teeth knocked loose and chipped. Holy fuck. Ruthless. It's like Amazon for pet. Ah, gotcha. I can't believe the price of that cat litter. It's still sitting there. It's going to sit there. No one's going to buy that $70 cat litter. They're nuts. Hey, Anna. It is sad and scary because, well, as I'm reading right now, there's a lot of corruption. I just spent over 14 on. Yeah, the cheapest one here by far is $20. It's ridiculous. Nevertheless, DA Burton Fitts insisted that her death was a suicide, though there were rumors among the movie land that Thelma Todd had been murdered by one of her intimate acquaintances, mob boss who suddenly left town on the night of Thelma's suicide. Many have speculated that the mob boss who murdered Thelma Todd was Lucky Luciano. Oh, I've heard of that name. Lucky Luciano? However, in 1935, Luciano had been in New York City living in Suite 39C at the Woolworth Towers until the murder of Dutch Schultz on November 13th, 1935. 5 days later, Luciano fled to Florida and was known by New York authorities to be in Hot Springs, Arkansas at the time of Thelma Todd's murder. So they don't know who did it then. Who lost a fur baby? They sent you a dozen yellow roses? That is amazing. Now that's amazing. I'm sorry. Anyone loses a pet. It's horrible. They're family, right? They're our kids. They're fur babies. In 1932, Thelma had a whirlwind romance with Pascal Pat DeSico, who had been an associate of the mob in New York during the bootleg days of the Roaring Twenties. Married in July 1932, DeSico and the Ice Cream Blonde opened Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, which became a popular night spot frequented by filmland celebrities and high rollers who were admitted into the Joya Room, a clandestine syndicate gambling den on the third floor. Thelma Todd had never wanted the gambling room, nor did she care for DeSico's underworld friends, among whom were Longy Zwillman and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Well, everyone knows Bugsy, right? In the mob's efforts to set up new avenues of illicit revenue after the end of Prohibition, Bugsy had a frequent visitor to the West Coast, and in 1935 he rented the apartment on the Sunset Strip. While it's popularly believed that Bugsy did not move to Los Angeles until 1936 or 1937, his FBI files established that he became a resident of Los Angeles in 1934. The 1935 Los Angeles Telephone Directory places Benjamin Siegel's residence at 8421 Sunset Boulevard, which is the Piazza del Sol apartments next to the Clover Club, where only a select Hollywood crowd was admitted by Siegel's mom, Maitre D, into the fashionable Clover Club casino. It wasn't long after Thelma Todd's marriage to Pat that she began to realize her husband and the mob were using her and the Sidewalk Cafe as a front for their gambling operations. And her marriage to DeSico proved to be stormy and short-lived. Divorcing him in 1935, she tried to evict him and his mob friends from the casino operation, but she began receiving threats and was told that she'd better cooperate with gangsters. Without explaining the nature of her growing fears, Thelma wrote a family member in Massachusetts that she was worried because she had fallen in with a bad crowd and was being intimidated. Yeah, that is why they may be mob. Yeah, that's what this guy's saying. This author's saying that. Yeah, right at the bottom it says the mob, the mogul, and the murder. Oh, that's good then. They donate to animal shelters. That's amazing. Angry about the threats she was receiving if she didn't cooperate with Siegel, with Bugsy, and his pals. On December 11th, Thelma made the mistake of going to District Attorney Burton Fitts' office. Oh, shit. Burton Fitts was in on it. And lodging a complaint against the mobsters who had muscled in on her cafe. She had no knowledge, of course, that the district attorney of Los Angeles was on the mob payroll, and that word would soon get back to the very people who had threatened her. I think I would too, honestly, Tammy. I mean, it sounds like such a great time. Well, not reading this book, but in another sense. Yeah, the hairstyles, the clothing, the cars. Yeah. On the night of Saturday, December 14th, she went to a party at Billy Wilkerson's nightclub on the Sunset Strip, which was attended by Sid Grumman, Spiros something, Zazu Pitts, Ida Lupino, yeah, and a number of film stars. Sometime after midnight, she was told by the head waiter, Alex Hooney, that a gentleman wanted to see her in the nightclub office. Whoever the gentleman might have been, Thelma became frightened, left the office, and abruptly left the party to drive faster and faster. She hurried back to Castle Lamar in her apartment about the sidewalk cafe. The chauffeur maintained that he dropped her off at the cafe door before returning to fade into the garage. 2 days later, on Monday morning, her body was found behind the wheel of a car. Yeah, of course. Yeah, obviously this was a murder. Yeah, like a hit, right? Exactly. Definitely. Well, especially if the district attorney and all that were in on it, and they're being paid by the mob, then yeah. When the Trocadero head waiter was questioned at the inquest as to the identity of the gentleman who had frightened Thelma in the nightclub office, Huney mumbled that he could not remember before breaking down and blurting out that he had been warned not to talk. I can't say and killed, Huney stammered, and produced a postcard addressed to Mr. Alex, cafe employee, Trocadero Cafe. The message on the back read, "Withheld testimony or kidnap trip." Wow. The paced up words had been from the Los Angeles Times. When District Attorney Vern Fitz was asked by reporters if he thought that the underworld was behind the threats, he merely remarked, "Witnesses before the grand jury are not being as helpful as they might be," and he insisted that Thelma Todd's death was an accident or a probable suicide, despite evidence to the contrary. Uncle Vern had been working in the DA's office at the time, and in later years he remembered much about the Thelma Todd case. One night he talked about it with little Ta when they were in their cups. Vern said that the man in the Trocadero office who had frightened Thelma Todd was Bugsy. Siegel had become enraged when he learned that the ice cream blonde who had gone to the DA, and according to Vern, it was Bugsy Siegel who had beaten and murdered Thelma Todd, put together the suicide scenario, and paid off Burton Fitz. That is sick. Definitely a hit. Vern was rather circumspect when he was sober, but a loquacious gabber when intoxicated, which was often. To my mother's aggravation, he would spend hours on the phone in the tap room, yakking with his pals, and I couldn't help but overhear some of Vern's conversations. So this is the author talking. So this is quite the history here. This no wonder he's got all the information. I mean, his grandmother and her boyfriend or whatever. I couldn't help but overhear some of Vern's conversations. Perhaps he thought he could talk freely around me because I was quiet and withdrawn. I was so shy in those days that Vern may have assumed I was mentally deficient. But I would hear things I didn't want to hear, things I didn't want to understand, but I understood. Early on, I perceived that Vern was connected to the mob. During the period of time he was consorting with my grandmother, he was one of Bugsy Siegel's lawyers. Wow. Shit. Bugsy and the syndicate operated in an increasing number of casinos, brothels, and race wires in the Hollywood area that catered to the movie crowd. And I gathered Vern was the fixer for the mob, the go between with the DA's office and the police to keep things nice and quiet, the bagman. After moving north to the land of the majors, we lived at 803 North Roxbury Drive, and Bugsy Siegel and his girlfriend, Virginia Sugar Hill, lived just behind us at 810 Northern Linden Drive. I would be terrified. In 1946, Bugsy and Virginia were spending a good deal of time in the Las Vegas preparing for the opening of the Flamingo Hotel, and Vern had a key to their Moorish mansion on Linden and looked after it when they were out of town. In December 1946, Bugsy Siegel staged the elaborate grand opening of the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, which proved to be a disaster. In the early months of 1947, he was struggling to keep his dream of the Las Vegas gambling empire afloat. He often came to LA and stayed at the Linden Drive house while on his cash hunting forays. The Flamingo venture was being financed with laundered syndicate money, along with other devious sources, and if there were things that Vern and Bugsy couldn't talk about over the taproom phone, it was only a short walk across the alley for a chat fence. On the night Bugsy Siegel was shot to death, while sitting on the sofa in his living room reading the Los Angeles Times of June 20th, 1947, Vern and one of his pals lugged a large padlock to her house and stashed it in the garage. It contained something that belonged to Bugsy and remained in the garage for a number of months. Around the house, my brother and I referred to it as Bugsy's trunk. Wow. Though I wasn't supposed to talk about it, I'd show it off to the neighborhood kids and we'd speculate as to what or who was inside. By the end of 1947, Bugsy's trunk disappeared along with Uncle Vern and little Todd. Holy shit. So his grandmother, her grandmother's boyfriend, and Bugsy all disappeared. I agree, Anna. Uncle Vern also knew a lot about the Black Dahlia case. Ah, that's where the mob is coming in. When the news first broke about the murder of Jane Doe number 1, the police were knocking on doors and around Norton Avenue trying to pick up clues to the victim's identity. Vern talked about the murder with Little Ta and other people on the phone, referring to the victim as though he knew her, and I got the impression that the murdered woman was somehow associated with the mob and Bugsy. Wow, no wonder why he wrote this book. He knows everything. He was told when he was a child, 15 years old. I mean, through the years, there have been many Jane Does brought into the Los Angeles County morgue, but establishing the identity of Jane Doe number 1 of January 15, 1947 was difficult. The body had been mutilated to such a degree that photos taken at the morgue could not produce a true likeness. The description in the unknown dead ledger stated, Jane Doe, #1, weight was 115 pounds, complexion was light, had green-gray eyes between the ages of 15 and 30. Her height was 5'5". Her hair was innate. What? I've never heard of that for dark hair, but her hair was dark. According to Detective Finis Brown, the extent of the disfigurement had led Harry Hansen to conclude that there had been a deliberate attempt to conceal the victim's identity. The knife slashed through the mouth from ear to ear made the face unrecognizable, and the fingerprints had been partially obliterated because the remains had been immersed in water for an extended period of time. As a result, the whorls and ridges of the fingers have become grooved and shrunken. Nevertheless, Ray Pinker's crime lab team inked the fingers and attempted to transfer the prints to a fingerprint card. Captain Donahoe of Homicide requested that Brown keep him informed of every aspect of the investigation. When Donahoe learned that Examiner staff artist Howard Burke had been allowed into the morgue to make a sketch of the murder victim for identification purposes, Donahoe became angry and questioned the merits of the procedure. Brown explained, you can't tell much from the original photo, but her face is badly cut, bruised, and puffed out of shape. So identification is difficult without the artist working on her likeness. Hopefully it will be recognized by somebody. Newspaper reporters police investigators had a different relationship back in the 40s. They were less adversarial and recognized the need to cooperate with one another in a crime investigation. While today there's only one daily metropolitan newspaper in Los Angeles, back in 1947 there were 5, and all were zealous competitors, especially on a major murder case that had captured the public's attention. The force of highly motivated investigative reporters out on the streets trying to dig up scraps of information by their daily deadline was much larger and more aggressive than the investigative force of the LAPD. And there was a cooperative trade-off of information between the police and the press, as well as a cooperative regarding facts and information that the LAPD wanted to keep under wraps. ASD. According to reporter Will Fowler, when the Examiner learned that the crime lab had sent the fingerprint card of Jane Doe number 1 to Washington, editor Jim Richardson had managing editor Warden Wargold called Captain Donohue and requested that LAPD supply the Examiner with a copy of the prints. Why are they giving the print? What? Pointing out that the winter storms had closed the airports in Washington and it might take days before the FBI could examine the prints, Woolard suggested sending a copy to the FBI via the Hearst Electronic Sound Photo Service, which was a new system for transmitting photos instantly to Hearst editorial offices across the county. Why the hell would the press doesn't need prints? Like, that's insane. We have this new sound photo machine, Woolard said. What about sending the prints over the sound photo? It's never been done before, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. Until we got an identification, we'll all be stymied with the investigation. I'm sorry, all you guys that are losing your pets. Daisy May. Convinced that the impaired prints would not be sufficient to lead to an identification and the sound photo system was problematic, Donahue felt there was no harm in cooperating and sent a copy of the prints to the Examiner's editorial office. That's fucked. And for the first time in the history of crime investigation at 4 a.m. on January 16th, 1947, a fingerprint card was transmitted to the FBI via sound photo. Waiting to take the prints of the machine was Ray Richards, head of the Hearst newspaper Washington Bureau, who immediately handed them over to the cavernous FBI fingerprint. But as Donahue had suspected, the FBI fingerprint experts were initially unable to work with the sound photo prints, which lacked clarity. Here's the negatives of Elizabeth Short's fingerprints sent by sound photo to the FBI. Here, I'll show you. Here's the photo that the guy in the morgue drew. And there's the fingerprints. The Examiner Photo Lab made a new photocopy, blew the prints up to a larger size, and transmitted enlarged negatives rather than positives. It proved to be a success. Within an hour, FBI experts were able to identify Jane Doe number 1. The victim was Elizabeth Short. Her age was 22, born in Hyde Park, Massachusetts on July 9th, 1924. Elizabeth Short had been arrested on September 23, 1943, with a group of soldiers and other girls who were drinking and causing a disturbance near Camp Cook, an army base north of Santa Barbara, California. Because she had been a minor and unaccompanied by a parent or legal guardian, she'd been taken into custody, booked, and fingerprinted. The prints of Elizabeth Short were on file with the FBI in Washington and clearly matched those of Jane Doe number 1. By mid-morning, Thursday, January 16th, the Examiner knew the victim's identity and broke the headline story in the morning edition of Friday, January 17th. In an extraordinary coup, the Examiner had succeeded in scooping its rivals. This scoop put the Examiner so far ahead of its opposition, they were never able to catch up, Will Fowler stated. Hours before other papers had a clue that the body hadn't ever been identified, our crew of reporters and photo hog? What the hell is that? Were digging into Elizabeth Short's life. The competition actually had to read our paper before they knew what step to take next in the investigation. Richardson's crew worked so effectively with the clues we were digging up on our own that we were able to start making deals with LAPD homicide. This made Captain Donahoe fume, but he had to go along. Here's the newspaper article with her face on it. She's pretty. It says girl torture slaying victim identified by Examiner FBI. Richardson shared William Randolph Hearst's penchant for sensational news and highly skilled in beating the competition out on the street with the latest scoop. He could be merciless, and there were many reporters at the Examiner that didn't like him. Though he was respected for his news gathering genius, Richard's demands on his staff were so high that some broke under the pressure. He could be inhuman from the moment he walked into the city room in the morning until after deadline and the next day's edition was locked up. But if he had won the scoop war, he could be human from deadline to dawn, and he'd break into his lazy eyed grin and glide around the news back as if he were on ice skates, making figure skating moves learned as a champion skater when he was a kid in Canada. I agree, Brittany. She was 22 years old. Yeah, 22 years old when she was murdered. On January 16th at 10:30 a.m., at the approximate time that Jane Doe number 1 was identified, the autopsy began in the dank, rat-infested basement of the Los Angeles Hall of Justice. That's lovely. The autopsy was to be conducted by Dr. Frederick Newbar, the chief autopsy surgeon for the country of Los Angeles. Dr. Victor, I can't even pronounce his last name, so we'll just go. Dr. Victor had been assigned as Newbar's assistant. Dr. Newbar concluded that the immediate cause of death was hemorrhage and shock due to the deep knife lacerations of the face and repeated blows by a heavy metal object to the face and right forehead. Jesus. So that's why she passed, that smile of being carved into her face. And she hemorrhaged and went into a shock due to the deep knife lacerations on her face. And then she was pistol whipped. That's such a mob move. I'm sorry, but it is. There were deep ridges on her ankles, thighs, wrists, and neck, indicating she had been tied with rope or wire. Dr. Newbar stated to an INS reporter. The victim's mouth had been slit at each side to the ear while she was still alive. Oh my God. The excruciating pain of this would bring on shock. The blows to the face and head concussion came from blows from an iron instrument with a blunt edge. Dr. Newbar thought this may have occurred after the slitting of the mouth. The ecchymosis, I don't know how to pronounce that, surrounding the deep facial cuts and head injuries, revealed that these wounds occurred while she was still alive. Such discoloration and bruising only occurs when the circulation of blood is unimpaired. But all the other indices of mutilation to the corpse were without ecchymosis, which was a clear, I don't know how to say it, indication that she was already dead when they occurred. One of the deep lacerations on the left leg eventually proved to be the surgical removal of a tattoo, which could have aided in the identification process. Dr. Newbar was quoted by the press as saying that he believed the victim was killed and mutilated while tied in a bathtub. How the... You have a good night, Brenda. Yeah, she was cut in the face from ear to ear. The person who did it was trying to, from what I think anyways, is that they slit her, her mouth from ear to ear. So it was like a huge smile, I'm assuming. And she was definitely tortured and definitely, yeah. Wow. How would you tie somebody to a bathtub though? I don't get that one. Oh wait. If they had the cloth one. I agree, Tammy. This for me, I'm thinking definitely a mob hit. Yeah. And it's been done before. Except for the ecchymosis. Thank you. Ecchymosis. I'll forget, but thank you. Ecchymosis. What was clear to Dr. Newbar and those who had studied the condition of the corpse on Norton Avenue was that the deep cuts were not brought about by the same instrument that was used to sever the corpse. The slashed mouth and cheek areas exhibited the ragged cuts of a knife with a Mutilation and bisection of the body was accomplished methodically with a surgical instrument by someone who was proficient in surgical procedures. Two different cutting instruments, two MOs. One instrument was employed before death, and the other was employed after death. The fact that the body had been bisected and surgical knowledge was never disclosed at the time, and the withholding of this vital information led to a misconception of the crime by both the press and the public that has been perpetuated for decades. So they did withhold this information, yeah. So the face was done by a jagged, what, steak knife? I agree, Tammy. Um, wow. It's like Jack the Ripper with the slashed mouth and the blows to the head were characteristics of a rage murder. You think? While the meticulous mutilation and bisection of the corpse with a surgical instrument were indicate of a more methodical pathology, suggesting that more than one person may have been involved in murder of the body. An examination for a spermatoza, what is that? An examination for spermatoza showed no results. Okay, so it is actually means sperm. Okay, never mind. And there was no indication that the victim had been ard. Yeah, right, Brittany? Autopsy reports are ordinarily part of the public record. However, Elizabeth Short's autopsy report has never been made available to the public. The original explanation for the sealed report was Captain Donahue's claim that it contained certain information that would be known only to the killer and that homicide could use this secret information as control questions when establishing the credibility of a prime suspect. Although many former LAPD homicide detectives, including Harry Hansen, long ago conceded that the murderer was deceased, up until the end of the 20th century, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office continued to refuse the release of Elizabeth Short's autopsy report, claiming that this was being retained because the case was unsolved. Yet, there is not another cold case homicide on record in Los Angeles in which the autopsy was not available. That should tell you something. I think there it was shoved under the rug. Upon Elizabeth Short's autopsy in 2003, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office stated, the Elizabeth Short autopsy report has been lost. Bullshit. Yet in the 1970s, duplicate copies of all autopsy reports in Los Angeles County were put on microfilm. The inevitable question arises, what secret is contained in the autopsy report that officialdom still does not want the public to know after a lapse of more than half a century? Wow. It was lost. Yeah, okay. An alleged copy of the autopsy report was printed for the first time in Janice Knowlton's book, Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer. And this was done by Pocketbooks, New York, 1995. But this too was suspect and proved not to be the official autopsy report. So that wasn't even it. It was based on a handwritten copy by an ex-officer of the sheriff's department who led Knowlton to believe it was copied word for word from the original. But it was a word-for-word deception that once again hid the dark secret that the authorities did not want the public to know, a secret known at the time only by Captain Jack Donahue, medical examiner Dr. Newbar, Finis Brown, Harry Hansen, and the killer or killers. Hey, Deb. Was mob and they paid for the record to get lost. Yeah, I would agree with that. Through the years, various rumors regarding the secret of the autopsy propagated. When Examiner editor John Richardson approached Captain Donahue in an attempt to obtain a copy of the coroner's report, Donahue outlined why the report and its secret information could not be released. Will Fowler recalled that Donahue privately informed Richardson of the mysterious secret of the autopsy, on the condition that the information would never be printed in the newspaper. Yeah, I don't know if I believe this. Let's see what it is. So Fowler said that Richardson was informed by Donahue that the killer had inserted An earlobe. Oh my God. Trigger warning. Fowler disclosed that Richardson was informed by Donahue that the killer had inserted an earlobe as well as the tattooed flesh cut from the victim's leg into her vagina. Holy hell. Like, this is disgusting. So that was the thing they didn't want out. However, photos indicate that her earlobes were intact. And if the flesh bearing the tattoo was removed to avoid identification, it was unlikely that the killer would have left it within the body. I have to agree with that. So it's another bullshit rumor. According to Fowler, Richardson concluded that Donahue wasn't telling him the truth. Nevertheless, this unpublished information was circulated by hearsay in the Examiner press room at the time, and similar rumors regarding the dark secret of the autopsy continue to be propagated to this day. When Hansen had first reviewed the body on Norton Avenue, he has said, "We won't know what we're really dealing with here until we get a postmortem." But the autopsy seemed to pose more questions than answers, and in Hansen's experience, the modus operandi in the death of Elizabeth Short has never occurred before. The deep slash of the mouth by a knife, the severe blows to the head by a metal object, the methodical mutilation and bisection of the body with a surgical instrument, the draining of blood. I didn't realize that she was drained of blood too. Fuck. The attempt to prevent identification, the prolonged immersion in water, the transport of the remains from a car on an empty cement sack found near the body, and the placement and display of the body near the sidewalk of public thoroughfare. This strange MO silently screamed its story, but spoke in the alien language of the deranged. Though there have been a number of brutal unsolved slayings of young women in the past, no similar MO existed in the homicide files of the LAPD, nor would a similar MO ever occur again during the remaining 23 years that Hansen was on the force. The indelible image of Elizabeth Short's mutilated body as it lay on the weeds on the Norton Avenue would stay with Detective Harry Hansen until he understood the dark secret contained in the autopsy report. And with the passage of time, he actually translate the silent scream of the sacred setting. I hope we learn like what the fuck it was, because it's driving me nuts now. All right, I'm gonna end there. And we'll be back on Thursday. I could read this book all night. I won't though. I'll wait. And we'll do this again every Thursday at 7 p.m. Tomorrow, KG, we make an exclusive about how she was. Fuck. Oh, that's good. Oh, thanks, Jill. I've always wanted to read this book. I've got the best one though. I did my research, and there's photos that have not been released apparently. There's statements, interviews. I mean, everything. So I will post them. I'm not going to do it now because then it's going to ruin the story. But as we go along, like I will show you guys the pictures and stuff. But when it comes to the transcripts, I'm going to have to post them on my community tab whenever we get to that point. That way you guys can read it for yourselves because they're long. And the FBI showed up at our house to look for a mobster. Really? This is a great book. A lot of stuff in here that I didn't know. We're only on chapter. Well, that I just ended chapter 2. So now we're on chapter 3, and this one's called AKA the Black Dahlia. So I will be going back to read this again on Thursday. I wish I could read more, but I've been on here for 2 hours. My throat's getting kind of sore. You think the kids up above us are going to fall through the ceiling? No worries, Dad. You can always go back and rewind it if you want to. My kid's going to eat me at a house and home. He's ate almost a whole box of cereal, all the cinnamon buns. That was what, 6 of them today, I swear to God. Plus his supper, he had seconds. Like, he's going through a growth spurt.
Hey, I did not eat a one.
You ate all the cinnamon buns, which I don't care because apparently I don't want one. I don't know why, but I don't.
Well, I did. Well, I ate like most of it. I ate.
I think there was 12.
I like 8 of them. I ate 8 of them. I think.
8 of them? Oh well.
They're good, okay.
Yeah, that's another thing too with these books that I'm reading. I love listening to podcasts and stuff like that whenever I'm cleaning. I just pop my earphones in when I'm vacuuming, and yeah. And I love reading. So I think Monday, because Country Girl Brenda, she did buy me a book, and it's called The Staircase. And this was the I believe it was a murder. It's called The Murder of Kathleen Peterson. Um, and then there's a bonus story at the end, but the minivan murders. I do have that book. I have read it, and it's pretty bad, so I don't know if I want to read that one. But I would like to read The Staircase. Maybe start that one on Monday. Yeah, you were saying that, Teresa. Well, hopefully I helped and it wasn't boring, but it definitely wasn't boring. It was heartbreaking, the one I did last night. But I had to get it off my chest. I've been wanting to do that. Oh yeah, he's becoming a man, all right. He just turned 12. Yeah, the minivan murders. Michelle Mashad and James DeFaggio, or I don't even know how to say his last name, but Michelle Mashad. So Michelle and James. I broke my heart too. No, I don't want all those carbs anyway. I'm surprised I didn't. I love food. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna shut up and get out of here. Thank you. The story I wanted to learn more about. So did I, Anna. That's why I wanted to do it, because I was told, and I not told. I read and I researched, and this is the book to have here. I got it on Amazon. I think it was. I can't remember how much. I forget, but here's the book. Okay. You don't live very far from Kathleen Peterson, where she lived. It's sad. Thanks, Trio. All right. You guys have a great night. I'll be back on Thursdays and p.m. Then hopefully we'll find out what the secret is that they've been hiding, and that's, we can figure that out. Not figure it out, but read about it, and hopefully, yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah, I'll be reading it every Thursday, sorry, until the book is done. Yeah. Thursdays, I always keep that as book club day. Not that book club, Brittany. All right. You guys have a good night. I'll probably, what is tomorrow? Friday? I'm going to order the laptop tomorrow. I don't know when I'm going to get it. Probably a couple days. It's through Amazon, so it should only take a couple days. I got Prime. And then hopefully everything goes good. All right. You guys have a good night. And yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.